So thanks everybody for joining. We have a couple of new features to show you, and then happy to answer some more questions on things as we go. So the first thing I'll show you, which is a new feature for cash legacies, for any kind of legacies actually, initial gifts. We can obviously, this is the section where we would create any specific cash amounts as cash legacies. And you,
Jesus,
sorry? Oh,
why can't I hear?
oh, we can hear you. So can people can hear me, right? Yes, I think you said you could.
Yes.
Great. So now, so sometimes when you're working on this and the client gives you a bunch of cash legacies and you put them in a certain order, and for whatever reason you want them to appear in the will in a different order, now we support that. So you just add them in. I'll just add one more here. So let's just say I think we've got somebody, Selma. Let's put her in for $5,000 just so we can keep track of what's going on. So right now, whatever order you add add legacies, they're going to appear like this. And what happens is in the will, all of the gifts that are within a particular scenario are grouped together. All cash gifts and all assets are grouped together by scenario. And they're printed in the order that they appear in the portal. So if I've entered it in this way, that's fine. That's how it's going to get printed, and that's how it always was. Well, now what I can do is I actually can change the order in the portal, and whatever order it appears here is how it's going to appear in the document within that particular scenario. So it hasn't changed any of our rules. We have a bunch of rules about how we're going to group legacies, etc. Those rules haven't changed, so it still works exactly the same. The only thing different now is that when there are a bunch of gifts listed within the same scenario, you can reorder them the way you want them to appear. Okay, so I'll give you some examples, and we're going to have a help desk article on that in the next couple of days. But and again, nothing that I'm saying is different than the way it works right now. But for example, if it sees that there are legacies that are only in the surviving spouse scenario, it's going to group all those together. If it sees that there are legacies that are in the surviving spouse and the descendants only scenario, it groups those together because there's a different opening. There's a different what we call scenario intro depending on who's alive and which scenario you're putting in it. So it's going to group it by that. So I just want to make that clear. The other thing is, and this applies for asset gifts too, it's going to list the asset gifts. So if we put that, given the bonds to Billy and let me just see something else, the shares. Oh, let me just do the bonds to Billy and the shares to John. So if I've done that, these are all only in this scenario, so they're going to appear in this order, but I can move them around. So I can have first it's going to say the shares and then it's going to say the bonds. Okay, so that's what's going to happen here. So if I run my preview, you'll see how that does. And again, it's grouping by scenario. The exception is because we had to account for what happens if you want certain cash legacies to be paid in priority to others. If you, and again, this is nothing new here, but you can set the priority of each gift. So if there's not enough money and there's an abatement, then it's going to go in that order that you want. So I'll show you that in a moment. But here you can see it's printing the Springfield shares first. Then it's got the bonds, and then it's all the cash gifts in this order that we've listed them. Okay. Any questions about that? And I think I've shown this before, but I'm going to just show you this, that there's a priority of payment for cash legacies. So if, for example, I wanted to make sure Selma got hers, if there was only $5,000 in the estate, and we didn't want all the legacies to abate ratably, which is the rule if they were all equal. We could set the priority for this gift to be 1. We could set the gift for Abraham's to be 2 if that was next. And let's say we want Abraham's and Holly's to be in the same priority. You can do all that, and then eState's going to order them in that order, regardless of how it appears in this UI. Okay, we call this the user interface. So I know it's a bit confusing because it has to support a whole bunch of different functions and priorities and wishes. But in most cases, the order that you're going to put the legacies in are the order that they're going to appear in the will, unless there's a good reason for them not to, is the way we do it. And eState knows why they shouldn't appear in this order. Okay. Any questions on that front? Oh, let's just see. Sorry, I saw there was a question. I missed it. It says, if you're preparing primary multiple wills, where do the non-cash initial gifts go? So basically any asset gifts for multiple wills, with the exception, well, let's talk about all of them. They will all appear in both wills, and they will say something like, if my home forms part of my primary estate, and that's what the primary will says. And then in the secondary will, it says, if my home forms part of my secondary estate, do this and that. And the reason we repeat asset gifts in both wills is because it's quite possible that at death, an asset that you thought might be in the primary will is actually in the secondary will, because, for example, it's held on a bare trust with a bare trustee or something like that, and so it can form part of the secondary estate, or vice versa, an asset that you thought would not need probate, like, for example, private company shares, for whatever reason, they no longer control the board, and the board requires probate when the person dies to transfer their shares. It would be in the primary will. And what we don't want is there to be a disconnect between a gift and where the asset lies. So if we had only put the gift of, let's say, land in the primary will, and it turns out that it doesn't form part of the primary will, it's part of the secondary will because it's a trust asset, it's an asset held in trust, then that gift would potentially lapse and you'd be sued potentially. So just about that. Hopefully that cleared things up. Okay, so that's that. Next. So any questions about this new feature about ordering it? And it just might make it, clients sometimes like to see it in a different order, and we never could support that before, and now we can support that. The second thing that I wanted to show everybody is a brand new customization, document customization. So let me just go back here, and I'll just close this down. And now, and these are both live, so they're in your portal right now. If you go to your documents reporting letter, and you can now change the contents, okay? So we always had these default options. Now you can go to contents options, okay? That's now a new feature. So I'm going to click on that. And what we did is we broke down every single part of the reporting letter so that you can customize it. And I'm going to go through a few of them, but I'm not going to go through all of them, but I just want to show you. So, for example, if I click on the opening is, thank you for retaining me to prepare your wills and powers of attorney. You might not want that. You might put in your custom. So you could put in your custom one, and it would be by default what would come up in every time you generated your reporting letter. Okay. So there's those ones that are, always included, or you have an option. I'm going to take you through the next category. Here's an example of the safekeeping one. Okay, so the heading is safekeeping, and then there's a whole bunch of components. Now, eState, as you know, is smart enough to know which paragraphs to include. So this is the intro for where you're returning originals to the client. Now, if you choose that, when you're selecting this, you say, well, I'm not returning any originals to the client, that won't appear. You don't, whether you include it here or not, it's not going to appear because it knows what paragraphs to include as well. Same for the intro for holding documents. If your firm, if for this particular client, you're not holding any originals, then this clause won't appear anyway. Okay, so you don't have to exclude that. You can basically use this the same way you've always generated a reporting letter. It's just if you want to customize some of the wording, feel free to go in and do that. But you don't have to worry, oh, I don't want, and I'll give you another example, joint retainer. For this client, I'm not acting for both of them, so I don't want to include a joint retainer. Well, you don't have to worry about that. It knows how many people you're acting for and what clauses to include. So those are what we call dynamic. You don't have to exclude those for any particular case because they'll be only included or excluded based on your particular client that you're generating this reporting letter for. Another example is future advances, right? I mean, you don't have to exclude this because it knows if you're including future, taking account of future advances in Hodgepot, so it's going to include that. So you can assume that anything in here that's included is only going to get included when it's necessary, okay? So you don't have to worry about that. But now you have power over every paragraph. So if you didn't like our children born out of wedlock clause, you can change that and put your custom in, and that'll be used at for your reporting letter from there on. Like all of our customization, it's customizable at the template level. So your sort of firm default, the way you normally do it. And then when you go to generate the reporting letter for any particular client, you'll also be able to, for this particular client, let's say for whatever reason, you want to generate a reporting letter and you want to override your usual wording, you can go in there and change that as well. So I'll just show you that in a moment. So like all of our customization, you can fix it. Like what I would do is fix it at the firm level for your 99% of the time. But then if there's a particular thing that you want to add or change for this particular client, you can go in and do that when you're generating the document for that particular client. Okay. So any questions on that, on the sort of customization of reporting letters? As you can see, we're moving more and more towards every part of every document being customizable, and an ability down the road, and hopefully by the end of this year, where you're going to be able to generate multiple different templates for yourself and different options and things like that, move things around and that kind of stuff. But we're moving towards that where every single part of this is going to be customizable. So any questions about that? And one thing we're going to do, and we wanted to get this out, but one of the things that we're going to do is mark which, when at the reporting level, content level, which are kind of dynamic, and just so you know, okay, that one's not always going to appear, just so remind you. But like I said, you can assume that it's going to know which clauses to include. I'll give you an example again, like, it's only going to use the U.S. client clause if you have a U.S. client, if the particular client is U.S., right? So these are all kind of dynamic based on the data of a particular client. Jordy, does that include customizing for your signature and letterhead? Not yet. The letterhead is a huge problem because it's images and the resizing and things like that is a bit of a challenge. Maybe you can share with us, Fred, the signing, your signature line. Tell me, maybe unmute and just say what you'd like in your signature line. Is there something? Because right now what it does is it puts your name there. It says yours very truly and then puts your name. Sorry, go ahead.
So the great updates, Jordy, and the product's like terrific. So keep up the great work. Yeah. So what I do is I just my letterhead is text based, right? So it's not fancy like some of these big Bay Street firms. So I simply have a Word document, and I have my letterhead in that document, I cut it, I paste it, I put it into the eState reporting letter that's been generated. And then I have my signature line with my digital signature, and I
Ah,
copy and paste that and I pop it in. So for me, it'd be really easy. I could just load the stuff in. The only image really is just the signature, but that's how
right.
I work.
Got it. And I do the same thing. So mine's exactly the same. I actually copy the eState. I generate the reporting letter. We copy the text. We put it into our letter. We have a letterhead precedent, and we just paste it in there. And then I have to add my signature as well. So let me. We've had it on our list, this letterhead thing, for ages. We're gonna get to it. It's just remarkably, it's a huge job. So I know that
You know,
lots of
I
people
get
want
it.
that.
It's great. I mean, it's great
Yeah,
as is. That would be
yeah.
icing on the cake, but no,
But we're
it's
we're
all good.
we're hoping to add icing. That's our job. So just for sure. It's always amazing to me when when you have this like, oh, we just need this done, right? And then you go to our dev team and they're like, oh, to do that we need to do this, and we're like, wow, really? So I've learned a lot. That's one of the great things. And then you'll ask them to do something crazy like this reordering thing. Well, that was done in a day and a half, right? And I'm like, you mean we could do that? Yep, no problem. So, uh, anyway, we're working on it. So thanks for your patience, everybody. Any questions or um, that you want to ask? We're not going to meet on next Tuesday. We're going to take that week off, but and then we're not meeting on the day after Labor Day either. But we'll start with our substantive Thursdays back the week after Labor Day, which I think is the 7th. Will be our first one back, and then the Tuesday after that, whatever date that is, the 15th or something. No, the 11th or 12th, on the next Tuesday. So, and we'll have more features by then. So we'll bring you guys up to speeds, but we try to keep adding icing on the cake and even things that are more fundamental. So, anything else, guys? Excellent. Well, hope you have a great couple of weeks, and we'll see you in early September. It's hard to believe, but we're thrilled to have you join us, and we're here, so feel free to reach out to support anytime you need us. Okay, so great. Thanks, everybody. Take good care.